Well, for those of you who've been following along with this series on YouTube, or have been collecting the Star Wars modern figures just like I've been doing, well, at this point in the line, we are starting to reach a major turning point. The first time the packaging went through a more dramatic change than just a color shift, we had a pattern shift, and, well, we were getting ready for the next big Star Wars. There's a lot to unpack with this wave, so I'm going to try to go quickly through some stuff so we don't dwell too long. We're talking about the Power of the Force 2 era, but this is now starting to butt up against the Episode 1 era. As this wave that we're going to be going over was hitting stores, this is the same time when Episode 1 was in prelim development, meaning there were early paintings, early concept art, we were just starting to hear about casting, we were starting to study glimpses of the new aliens, the new ships. It all looked mysterious and cool and inviting, and yes, we hadn't met Jar Jar yet at this point. Now, this also meant that we were going to get our first brand shift for the basic figures. Nowadays, we tend to get Star Wars that changes packaging almost annually. Back when it launched in '95, Hasbro/Kenner kept with the same line look for quite a few years. And this wave marks the first big step in what would be called an evolution, not just a revolution, meaning a slight change. We were now heading towards Episode 1, and because of that, we were going to get Episode 1 tie-in packaging, where characters were going to be linked to their Episode 1 counterparts. So this wave, which was known as the Flashback wave, consisted of only A-list characters. And this is really significant, because a lot of these characters, one, hadn't been on shelf in a long time for basic collectors, and two, it essentially represented all the A-list characters in a new way. Something where they could still be recognizable in their core sort of look from the first movie, meaning Episode 4, except for Yoda, who's in Episode 5, and Palpatine, who's in Episode 7. Okay, I'm off track a little bit. Let's see if we could tackle this from the ground up. So we all know when Power of the Force 2 launched in '95, it had the bright orange packaging and the side pictures with the characters that didn't always match the figure inside, and we got a shift, call it an evolution, from the orange card to the green card after the first year. The green card stuck around for a long time. Now our first revolution, where it is actually changing a pattern, was this pack-out wave that came with the freeze frame cards. Going forward, packaging for Star Wars basic figures would change a lot more and a lot more often. But at the time, this was pretty groundbreaking and it was pretty different. And it showed that the brand was starting to do something different. And this wave was very, very much a Malibu Stacy new hat wave, because we had all these characters already. And honestly, a lot of people thought this was, well, a way of kind of bowing out. So let's take a look. We start with Luke Skywalker, who, like all the characters in this wave, had had previous releases. He did get a more film-accurate version about a year earlier compared to the first release that was really buffed up when that was what Kenner thought kids were going to be into. And for this flashback wave, we not only got a Luke who was back in his slimmed-down, movie-accurate look, but he came with some accessories that were really unique and had never at this time been done before. So if you're wondering why Luke is wearing a hat and a poncho and carrying a big long rifle and binoculars, well, it's because all of this happened in the deleted scenes and in some, shall we say, PR images that were taken for the first movie intended to use to, well, promote scenes that were never in the final cut. Yeah, there's no shots of him in the movie. But for those of us who like these deleted scenes and want to have the chance to recreate Luke as a farmer on Tatooine and hanging out with his best bud, Biggs Darklighter, well, this figure was a godsend. Next up, Darth Vader, again getting a Malibu Stacy new hat for the freeze frame wave, linking him to Episode 1. While the first figure released on the orange card was, again, that sort of buffed up character that all of the original releases were, he also had the limited advantage that he could only hold his lightsaber in one hand, which isn't really film accurate, although he does do that in Empire when he's battling Luke briefly. Alright, So this new version on the the flashback, not freeze frame, flashback, well, the biggest change was Vader could now hold the lightsaber with two hands. And this was pretty significant because we'd never had a Darth Vader before that could do this. Well, we did have the cinema scene one, but that had very little articulation. So this was an articulated Vader who could now battle Obi-Wan. And speaking of Obi-Wan, he also got a slightly dramatic re-release and updated look where his hood was up. Yep, the first version, even though the photo on the card showed Obi-Wan with his hood up, well, the character came with his hood down, much like the original figure from the 1980s. And the whole Jedi cloaks were done as one slip-over piece. We would get a new other updates of Obi-Wan in his hood-up look as time went on. But yeah, at the time, this was pretty revolutionary. If we had to rebuy Obi-Wan, at least it was worth it. Chewbacca? Yep. Hey, kind of picking up on a pattern at this point. A-list character, have to find a way to update him to get him out for this let's get excited about episode 1 wave. The thing with Chewbacca, though, is unlike many of the other characters, he really doesn't have that many different looks throughout the original trilogy. He does get a little bit of a different haircut for episode 6, and that was sort of explained away in Shadows of the Empire. And they even did an action figure of Chewbacca after his hair is buzzed between Empire and Jedi, which is why in Jedi his hair looks different, in the canon at least before Shadows got, excommunicated. Now, we did get a more accurate Chewbacca in the Minok Hunt pack, and this version for the flashback photo used the same proportions, where he was no longer buffed up, and he was now going to get sculpted on snow deco. We would get a few other Hoth-inspired Chewbaccas in the line as time went on, but this was the only one where the snow was actually sculpted onto the figure, as opposed to just painted on. A lot of the future Hoth Chewbaccas would just get sort of a speckle. Princess Leia definitely needed an update. So this was one of the more, it was a disappointing figure. Let's just say that. I mean, it was not attractive. This is supposed to be Carrie Fisher at her most beautiful. She did get an update in the same wave as that Luke with blast shield helmet. And this version was not her A New Hope classic look. It was the outfit she wears at the very end of A New Hope on Yavin when they're giving out the medals, except to Chewbacca. We did get a Princess Leia in her ceremonial outfit as a soft good execution in the Princess Leia collection about 1.5 years earlier, but this was the first time we got a single-carded version. Of course, it wouldn't be the only single-carded version. This version of Leia would come back several times, sometimes just with a new head, sometimes with an entirely newly tooled body. Yoda, got to get Yoda in there, especially because Yoda actually did appear in episode 1, as opposed to, say, Luke and Leia that don't, because, they haven't been born yet. The original version of Yoda for Power of the Force 2 came with the backpack for Dagobah, which in the vintage line had to be mail-ordered with proof of purchase. So it was cool to now get one in the package, and it was a way to make Yoda worth the price. We got a second Yoda with the Total Galaxy, and while it's fun to reimagine Yoda in different ways, well, for those of us who want, Jedi Master Yoda, he doesn't change that much, and it's hard to do new versions. So the way Yoda was Malibu Stacy New Hatted, as in the verb to Malibu Stacy New Hat, is he was given new accessories, all things that he used on Dagobah, cooking pot, Luke's compass that he tried to steal, and his cane, and he also got rooted hair. So it was the same Yoda body as the first release, but with a new head that now had rooted hair. And you could now recreate Yoda's amazing cuisine where he makes his root leaf soup, which, yes, that is a thing, and he says that line in the movie. It's really hard to hear until the special edition cleaned it up. And it was the only trivia pursuit question I ever got wrong, was what was the name of the soup that he fed Luke on Dagobah. And I was like, what are you talking about? They never name that. Nope, they do. He says, root leaf, I make. Yep, you can't hear it in the original cut. Special edition cleaned up the audio. All right. R2-D2. So while we had a few different versions come out in early Power of the Force 2, including a Lights and Sounds version and the single-carded version that for the first time had a third leg, which was repacked in the Princess Leia collection with a much better looking classic Leia, kind of, again, making up for that original carded Leia look. Well, R2 would get refreshed quite a few times in Power of the Force 2. In fact, he had more characters in Power of the Force 2 than his counterpart C-3PO. Probably because, well, R2 does more in the movies, and he has lights and sounds, and he gets dirty, and, well, I don't know. R2-D2 is just cooler, what can I say? This version, though, is probably one of the more disappointing R2s that has been put out, and that's because it was made to accommodate the lightsaber ejection feature. So this was the third R2 from the vintage line, the second one being the sensor scope, the first being, just standard, and then the third R2-D2 in the vintage line had the ejecting lightsaber. So now we had a modern counterpart to that, and the figures very much were released in the same order. Basic R2, R2 with sensor scope, and lightsaber ejection. While the vintage figure, the lightsaber just went right into the main body cavity and could pop out for this new Power of the Force 2 flashback series. Well, the saber went all the way through his body into his third leg, which meant he had this giant oversized third leg that just looked terrible. I'll be honest. This is one of my least favorite R2-D2 figures of all time. But hey, gotta be completist. A lot of fans thought this wave was going to mean the end of Hasbro Kenner 3 3/4 because we hadn't gotten so many refreshes of main characters before. And while Emperor Palpatine was planned for this wave due to shipping issues, he didn't come out until this wave was refreshed a few months later. So we'll cover him in a video or two in order to preserve the actual release order. And then, of course, we got our second wave of flashback figures, which included C-3PO, Aunt Beru, and Anakin as an old man. And this was the wave that made me quit buying Star Wars action figures. I mean, I obviously came back.